Did you know that if you didn't get a proper burial in ancient Greece, you haunted the living as a ghost? Hello and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly and today's video is all about Hades the god, Hades the underworld, and Tartarus in Greek mythology. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. If you haven't already heard, World History Encyclopedia has teamed up with Andante Travels to bring you the Treasures of Ancient Greece guided tour. Join our expert tour guide, Dr. Rita Roussos, as she takes you on a journey through classical Athens to Delphi, across the Gulf of Corinth, and into the Peloponnesian Hills, where the hero Hercules began his 12 labors, and King Agamemnon set out to rescue Helen and capture Troy. Make sure to visit worldhistory.travel or hit the link in the description below to learn all about this amazing trip, and we hope to see you there. The Greek god Hades was born to the Titans Rhea and Kronos, but Kronos had learned from his mother and father, Gaia the earth and Uranos the heavens, that he was fated to be defeated by one of his own children. So, promptly after giving birth to Hades, whom Hesiod in his Theogony describes as mighty Hades who lives under the earth, merciless of heart, along with his siblings Hestia, Demeter, Hera, and Poseidon, were swallowed by their father. Zeus was saved from this fate though, and according to the Greek writer Pseudo-Apollodorus, when Zeus was all grown up, he got the Titan Metis to give Kronos a drug to vomit up all of his swallowed children, and then the 6 of them went to war against the Titans. After the battle known as the Titanomachy, the Olympian gods were victorious and confined the Titans in Tartarus, the deepest and darkest part of the underworld. Now that the Olympian gods were in charge, the 3 brothers divided up the cosmos, so each of them had a domain of their own. Poseidon drew the sea, Zeus the sky, and Hades the mists and darkness of the underworld. Hades wasn't quite as active in the stories of Greek mythology, especially considering he was the only god who did not reside on Mount Olympus. But he seems to have still been held in high esteem and in superstitious awe by the ancient Greeks. They tried to avoid saying his name directly, but would use epithets like Eubuleus, meaning giving good advice. There is also evidence for sacrifices and rituals in honor of Hades, which were carried out at night, and the blood of victims would soak into the earth to reach the god of the underworld. Hades, with his Greek name meaning unseen, was also the god of hidden wealth, and his Roman name Pluto or Pluton meant the lord of riches, suggesting that Hades knew the location of buried treasure, but also the secrets of the afterlife. Probably the most well-known myth of Hades is his abduction of the goddess of spring and daughter of Demeter, Persephone. This myth is best known from the Homeric hymn to Demeter, dating to the 7th or 6th century BCE, and tells the tale in its entirety. With the permission of Zeus, the king of the gods and the father of Persephone, Hades opened a chasm in the ground and took the girl as she was picking flowers in a field. Demeter searched for her daughter with help from Titans Hecate and Helios. Demeter swore that she would not let crops grow on earth until she saw her daughter again. So Zeus sent Hermes down to the underworld to bring Persephone back to see her mother, and to put an end to the barrenness of the earth. Although Hades graciously allowed Persephone to leave the underworld to see her mother, he had first made sure she had eaten a pomegranate seed, which meant that she always had to return to the underworld. And so, a deal was made that Persephone would spend 1/3 of the year in the underworld with her husband, although other sources do say half the year, and the other 2/3 of the year above ground with her mother and the other gods. He did, of course, like many other gods, have lovers, and one of the more well-known was Minthe. Minthe was a naiad or water nymph who was a lover of Hades, but she was transformed either by Demeter or Persephone into a mint plant. Or perhaps she was turned into dust, and from the dust, Hades grew a mint plant. The mint plant was a sacred plant of Hades, and was probably used to mask the smell of death during funerary rites in ancient Greece. As the god of the dead and the underworld, Hades was usually thought to be an infertile god, although in some myths, like in the Orphic hymns, with Persephone, Hades was the father of the Erinyes, also known as the Furies, and Melano, an underworld goddess. There is also a fragment of a Greek tragedy by Aeschylus, which names Hades as the father of the Orphic god Zagreus, although in the Orphic hymns and other ancient sources, he is the son of Persephone and Zeus. Hades does turn up every now and then in myths of heroes, such as when a grieving Orpheus descends into the underworld looking for his recently deceased wife, Eurydice, and plays his lyre to the king and queen of the underworld. His music draws tears from the eyes of the Furies, and after his heartfelt plea, Hades and Persephone could not deny him. They gave him leave to take Eurydice, but told him he could not look back on her following him whilst in the underworld, or the gift would fail. The couple moved away, up and out of the underworld, but Orpheus couldn't help but turn for a look at his wife, and the moment he did, she slipped away, back into the underworld, and lost to him forever. Hades also had a run-in with Heracles, whose final labour was to bring the three-headed dog Cerberus from the underworld, which Hades allowed him to do. Now that we know all about Hades the god, let's explore Hades, or Domos Aideo, the House of Hades. The Homeric poets, or those committing their works into writing in the 8th century BCE, knew only of Hades. There was no Elysium, but the shade of every deceased person ended up in Hades, moving through the gloom of the asphodel fields. Hades was thought of perhaps more as a final resting place for the soul, rather than a place of suffering or torment. If the deceased was buried with the proper funerary rites, then the soul would be led to the river Styx in the underworld by Hermes Psychopomp, and then they would be ferried across to the gates of Hades by Charon, the boatman. At the gates of Hades, the souls were met with the three-headed dog Cerberus, or 50-headed if you're reading Hesiod, who stood guard and kept the souls in. If you didn't get a proper burial, which, among other rites, meant that a coin wasn't placed in your mouth to pay Charon, then you would wander the earth as a ghost and visit the living in their dreams to demand a proper burial. One of the most famous descriptions of the Greek underworld is probably from Book 11 of the Odyssey, titled Book of the Dead, where Odysseus visits the underworld in order to talk to the seer Tiresias. Odysseus and his men poured a libation to the dead of honey and milk, sweet wine, water, and white barley meal. Then Odysseus cut the throat of his sheep and poured their blood over the pit he had dug. Spirits gathered at the pit, crowds and crowds of them, and in fear Odysseus made a prayer to Hades and Persephone. Odysseus talked to the spirit of Elpenor, his dead comrade, his mother Anticlea, Tiresias, and Persephone sent the spirits of numerous women, wives, and daughters. Then he met his friends and comrades Achilles, Agamemnon, and Patroclus, who were sorrowful and shedding tears. The great hero Achilles left Odysseus after telling him he would rather be a poor man alive on earth than to be a dead hero in Hades, before Odysseus himself was driven from the underworld back to the land of the living. Later in the classical Greek myths, the concepts of Elysium and Tartarus were added to the vision of the afterlife. Upon arriving at the gates of Hades, the souls would be judged by the three arbiters of justice, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Iacchos. If you lived a particularly good life, then you would be led to the Elysium fields, and if you lived a particularly bad life, your soul was handed to the Furies and taken to Tartarus. Tartarus is said in the ancient sources to lie as far below Hades as the earth is beneath the sky. Tartarus was the lowest level of Hades, and it was where those who deserved their terrible fate lived out their afterlife in eternal darkness. There are many men from Greek myths who did things so terrible in their life that they were deserving of never-ending torture, and here are a few of the most famous. There is Tantalus, who was a legendary king of Sipylus, a kingdom that bordered Lydia and Phrygia. There are three versions of his story. One is that he gossiped about the gods' divine plans for humanity, and the second is that he stole nectar and ambrosia, the food and drink of the gods, from their home on Olympus, and shared it with mortals on Earth. These two are bad, but not completely heinous. unlike the third version of his story. Tantalus wanted to test whether the gods actually knew everything, and so he killed and cooked up his son, Pelops, and then fed him to the Olympian gods. The gods knew right away that there was something wrong with the food, but poor Demeter, who was devastated about not knowing where her daughter was, ate some of Pelops' shoulder. The gods put Pelops back together with an ivory prosthetic shoulder since Demeter ate it, and for his audacity, Tantalus had both his kingdom and his dynasty cursed. And then, after he died, he headed straight to Tartarus. There he was sentenced to eternal thirst, standing in a pool of water, but never able to quench that thirst by dipping his head down, while at the same time fixed below a tree of fruit, but never able to quite reach it by raising his chin up. Then we have Ixion, who was audacious enough to attempt to seduce Hera, wife of Zeus, queen of the Olympian gods and goddess of marriage. But before this, he was a king of the Lapiths, who was promised to marry Dua, the daughter of Aeneas, but he didn't want to pay the rich bridal gifts that he had promised. So instead, he decided to just kill Aeneas, which went to plan at a banquet at his palace where he had Aeneas fall into a pit with a charcoal fire at the bottom of it. The gods were outraged, but Zeus, for some reason, took pity on him and invited him to Mount Olympus for a dinner, as well as absolving him of his crimes. It turns out that Zeus had a plan. He knew that Ixion was hell-bent on wooing his wife, and so he crafted a cloud to look just like Hera. Ixion fell for it and slept with the cloud Hera, from which the Centaurus were born. Ixion went back to Earth gloating about sleeping with Hera, but it was finally time for Zeus to punish him for all his wrongdoings. First, he was repeatedly lashed by Hermes, repeating the phrase, "Benefactors deserve honor," until he sounded like he really meant it. Then he was tied to a flaming wheel, which was perhaps the sun, and was sent to spin forever through the heavens, eventually ending up in Tartarus. Finally, the third of this devilish trio is Sisyphus. Sisyphus was the king of Corinth and was so wily he cheated Death and Hades himself, not once, but twice. The first time was when Sisyphus died, he headed to the underworld and then managed to capture and chain up Thanatos, the personification of death. This meant that no humans could die until he was unchained, and it meant Sisyphus could return to life no problems. Thanatos was eventually freed by Ares to continue his work. The next time Sisyphus found himself dead, he pleaded to Hades and Persephone to let him back to the realm of the living. He pleaded on the pretense of instructing his wife to perform the proper funerary rituals for him. But he had, in fact, told his wife not to do any of the usual offerings and rituals associated with death. The king and queen of the underworld let him out, but of course Sisyphus made no attempt to return to the underworld and lived to a ripe old age, especially considering Thanatos didn't want to go anywhere near him after last time. His third death stuck though, and there was to be no escaping this time. Sisyphus was made to complete the most tedious form of torture, where he had to wrestle and roll a huge boulder to the top of a hill, but right as he got close to the top, the weight turned it back down the hill again, and so again he walked down the hill to begin his journey up again with the boulder, only to have it again slip from his grasp and roll back down the hill for eternity. Which do you feel was the worst torture of the three? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia. For more great articles and interactive content, head to our website via the link below. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation and you can find us on Patreon, a brilliant site where you can support our work and receive exclusive benefits in return. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you soon with another video.